Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to Pre-Algebra. I'm Miss Betsy, and today we are working on section 3.7, which is dividing with decimals. If you happen to be using our text, which is Pre-Algebra for Christian Schools, published by Bob Jones University Press, you'll see that we're on page 96. Otherwise, if you're just interested in learning how to divide by decimals, divide with decimal numbers, then you've come to the right place. Before we get started, I wonder if you can tell me what you would call a Tyrannosaurus Rex who just talks and talks and talks and talks. Well, you would call him a dinobore. You divide decimal numbers in a very, very similar fashion to how you would divide whole numbers. Let's just say that we are going to divide a decimal number 24.8. And we want to divide that by 8. Long division here. We're dividing by a whole number. The number by which we are dividing is called the divisor. The number underneath the division symbol is called the dividend. The answer is called the quotient. When you have a dividend that is a decimal number, but a divisor that's a whole number, you don't have to change the location of your decimal point at all. You simply locate the decimal point directly above the location of the decimal point in the problem. 8 goes into 24 3 times. 3 times 8 is not 44. 3 times 8 is 24. 24 minus 24 is 0. Bring the 8 down. How many times will 8 go into 8? 1 time. 1 times 8 is 8. We have a 0 remainder. We have nothing else to bring down for our long division. Our answer to 24.8 divided by 8 is 3.1, or 3 1/10. And how exactly would we check this? Same way you would check any other normal long division problem. You would say 3.1 times 8. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 3 is 24. But the answer is not 248 because we have a decimal that we're multiplying in there. We learned earlier that the way that you locate a decimal number, the decimal point, when you're multiplying, is count the total number of decimal places to the right of the decimal point. Use that total number in the answer. So 24.8 would be our product here. We have a total of 1 place to the right of the decimal point, because our factors have a combined total of 1 place to the right of our decimal point. So 24.8 divided by 8 gives us an answer of 3 1/10. So let's do another one. Let's divide 51 5/10 by 25. We're dividing 51 5/10 by 25. And we're using 5/10 in decimal form, not in fractional form. 51 5/10 divided by 25. We're dividing by a whole number here, so the location of the decimal point does not change. You simply locate that decimal point in the same place in the answer as it was in the beginning problem. 51 divided by 25. How many 25s can you count out of 51? 2. 2 times 25 is 50. We subtract, we have 1. 51 minus 50 is 1. You bring the 5 down. We don't worry about that decimal point because we've actually located it up here in the quotient. Can you count any 25s out of 15? No. How many times does 25 go into 15? 0 times. 0 times 25 is 0. 15 minus 0 is 15. Are we finished with decimal division? No. At that point, go down, bring down a 0 as a placeholder. 25 goes into 150 6 times. 6 quarters are $1.50. If you do mental math in your head where you're going into coins or dollars, it sometimes helps a lot. Everybody knows 6 quarters is $1.50. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 2 is 12 plus 3, 150. Now our division is completed because we do not have a remainder. Our answer, 2 6/100 is what we get when we divide 21 5/10 by 25. Now let's go ahead and use this same long division problem here. Let's say that we wanted to estimate the quotient for this problem. And let me just go ahead and write this answer here, where I said 51.5 divided by 25 was equal to 206. Nope. Did you hear what I said? It was equal to 206? It's not, is it? You have to worry about the location of that decimal point. So it's 2 6/100. Now how could we estimate this to see if we were in the right ballpark with our answer? Well, your text tells you on page 97, first you're going to round the decimal to the nearest whole number. So we're going to round the decimal to the nearest whole number, 52 divided by 25. Now it says, then choose a compatible number for the dividend before you divide. And this is where your vocabulary is so very important. What's the dividend? It says choose a compatible number for the dividend. What are they talking about? The dividend is the number that is being divided up into a bunch of smaller pieces. Divisor, quotient. If you have not yet learned that, 52 divided by 25. If you've not yet learned your vocabulary, dividend, divisor, quotient, dividend, divisor is equal to quotient, dividend, dividend, divisor, quotient. Make sure that you know exactly what they're talking about. You can't have to stop and think about it. You have to know that 52 is the dividend and 25 is the divisor. The answer, 2.06, is the quotient. Okay? Take the time to make sure you understand dividend, divisor, and quotient, and I'm going to have that English go away off our blackboard here. It says, choose a compatible number for the dividend before you divide. Okay, what they're saying is, find some multiple of 25. Can you divide 52 by 25? No. But what can you divide? How about 50? What do you get if you divide 50 by 25? You get 2. If you need to do that out this way, 25 times 1 is 25, 25 times 2 is actually going to give us 50. So when we estimate our solution by rounding, what we've done is first, we round to the nearest decimal. $51.5 rounds up to the nearest, well, I said nearest decimal, to the nearest whole number. the nearest whole number, 51.5, would round up to 52. Then you take this 52 and you adjust it so that it's a convenient multiple of the divisor. 50 divided by 25 is equal to 2. So 51.5 divided by 25 is approximately equal to 2. We got our actual answer here of 2 600ths, so this lets us know that 2.06 is reasonable. But what would have happened if we had mislocated our decimal point and we said 20.6 was the answer? This is where the value of knowing how to estimate comes in, because you'd say, okay, it's approximately 2. Well, if it's approximately 2, how in the world did I end up with an answer of 20? And that right there would have you saying, I did something somewhere wrong. Either I estimated incorrectly or I divided incorrectly. But these two are so far apart, there's no way that everything that I did here is correct. So that's the advantage of learning how to estimate when you're dividing. It helps you check your answers, helps you make sure that the solution that you're arriving at is reasonable. Now I want to show you something here. Let's say that we have 3.0 divided by 9.0. And how many times does 3 go into 9? 3 times 3 . 3 times 30, 90. What happens if we move this decimal over again and they're just showing you a pattern here? If you're dividing now by we've moved this decimal point one place over. This is how it started with. We move it one decimal place over to get 30 divided into 90. 3 times 30 is 90. Our decimal place is still right after the 3. Our quotient is still a 3. What if we move our decimal place, decimal point 2 units to the right? Then we're going to have 300 divided into 900. How many times does 300 go into 900? 3 times. So what they're illustrating to you here, they just want you to see, if you move the decimal on the divisor and the dividend the same number of places, the relationship between dividend and divisor doesn't change, so your quotient is going to remain the same. 3, 3, and 3. And they're going to use that principle and that relationship when you are dividing by a decimal, dividing a number using a decimal divisor. So let's go ahead and look at this and see what we have. We have 20.54, 20 5400ths, divided by 1 3/10. So let's go ahead and write that as a long division problem. 20 54/100ths divided by 1 3/10. Now we have decimal numbers that are involved here in our division, and what we showed you earlier is that you move this decimal point directly up when you divide by a whole number. However, we're not dividing by a whole number, are we? We're dividing by 1 3/10. So this is what you do. I'm going to read it directly from your book. It says, make the divisor a whole number by moving the decimal point all the way to the right. 1.3, we're going to make that a whole number by moving that decimal point the whole way over to the right. So the location, the new location of our decimal point is right here. We're dividing by 13. Now, that example that I showed you before where we were dividing multiples of 3 into multiples of 9, we saw that if you move the decimal point the same number of places in the dividend and in the divisor, the quotient didn't change. I'm making a little bit of a mess here on my writing. Need a couple more hands here. 20.54. We're going to move this decimal point one place to the right also. We now have the new location for a decimal point because we want to always be dividing by a whole number. Now we're dividing by 13. You wouldn't need to have that to show that decimal point there. I just left it so that you'd see that we've moved 1 unit to the right with the divisor, 1 unit to the right with the dividend. Now let's see what we end up with when we divide. How many times will 13 go into 20? It goes in 1 time. 1 times 13, we're going to subtract to end up with 7, and we bring down the 5. 13 will go into 75 5 times. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 1, carry 1, is 65. We're going to subtract. But one thing you notice that I haven't done yet, haven't done anything with this decimal point here. And how do I locate the decimal point in my quotient when I'm dividing by a whole number? You put the decimal point in exactly the same place. Just sort of pick it up and move it upstairs, if you will. Now, 75 minus 65 is 10. We're going to bring down that 4. And we have 104. How many times will 13 go into 104? I'm looking for something that's going to end in a 4. 3 times what gives me something that ends in a 4? 3 times 8 is 24. So I'm thinking that 8 is probably what my solution, my final digit is going to be here. Show your work over on the right-hand side of your page and make sure that you've got this done correctly. 8 times 3 is 24. You're going to carry 2. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 2 is 10. And there we have 104. We have a remainder of 0. So 15 and 8/10 is the solution that we arrive at when we divide 20.54 by 1 1/3. Approximate 1/3 by 1 3/10. What we did, remember, we had the original location of our decimal point, 1.3, 20.54. We relocated that decimal point 1 unit to the right so that we would be dividing by a whole number. However you move the decimal point in a division problem, however you move it in the divisor, you have to locate that the same, whatever change you have here, we moved it 1 unit to the right, we have to also move that decimal point 1 unit to the right in the dividend. And then you carry out your division. This should all be total, complete review for things that you've been doing for several years. I don't see a real need to show you another one. Let me do one more thing about rounding though. Let's look at this example. When you first started long division, you might have had something like 16 divided by 5. 3 times 5 is 15. When you subtracted, you had 1, and you wrote that as 3 remainder 1. That's how you began to do long division. And then, maybe the next year, when you did 16 divided by 5, 3 times 5 is 15. Your difference was 1, and you wrote that as 3 and 1/5. And then you began to move into decimal division, and the next way that you saw this was, okay, 16 divided by 5, 3 times 5 is 15. Well, we don't want to have a remainder. We don't want to write that as a fraction either. We want this to be a decimal number. So this is where you begin to annex zeros, if you will. You add your decimal point, bring down the 0. 5 goes into 10 2 times. 2 times 5 is 10. And you saw that your solution to this problem was 3 and 2/10. So what we did now was show you 3 different ways of writing the answer to the division problem 16 divided by 5. Way that you're never going to use anymore. 3 remainder 1, 3 and 1/5, which you're rarely going to use, and 3 and 2/10. That's interesting how I was going to write that. 3 and 2/10. And you know that you can rename 1/5 as a fraction with a denominator of 10 by multiplying the numerator and the denominator by 1. And you know that 2/10 and 1/5 are the same. Well, this is easy enough to do because our division ended completely, but sometimes you're going to want to round an answer to the nearest tenth or to the nearest hundredth. So what are you going to do when you have that? Let's look at this problem here. We have 0.08 divided into 0.51, and this says round to the nearest tenth. Round to the nearest tenth. First off, we have to determine what we're going to do with these decimal points so that we can perform the division correctly. First off, we don't want to be we don't want to be dividing by a decimal number. So how do we convert 0.08 into a whole number? This is where you move the decimal point the entire way to the right. What did we do? We moved that decimal point 2 places. Since we've done that with the since we've done that here with the divisor, we're going to move the decimal point 2 places to the right here as well. And since it gets very quickly a messy looking problem when you've got your arrows and extra dots, I'm just going to go ahead and rewrite that. That becomes the whole number 8 divided into 51. So we want to do this division problem. What math fact do we have? 8 times what is closest to 51? 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. 8 times 7 is 56. So we're going to say 6 times 8 is 48. When we do our subtraction, we come up with a difference of 3. The answer to this problem now says round this to the nearest 10. So you don't say 6 remainder 3. You don't say 6 and 3/8. You go ahead and turn this into a decimal division problem so that you can round this to the nearest tenth. How do you do that? By annexing zeros. We've got our decimal point and that 0. Going to bring down the 0. So how many times will 8 go into 30? 3 times 8 is 24. What do you get when you subtract? You have 6. Are we finished? The problem says round to the nearest tenth, and we've got this. This answer here is 6 3/10. Yes, it's 6 3/10, but you have to be able to round this number to the nearest tenth. Remember, when you're rounding something, you have to go one place to the right of it. So we're going to have to add one more 0 so that we can divide one more time. 8 times what is 60? 7/8 are 56. We have a remainder of 4. Are we finished now? We have 6 37/100. No, the division's correct at this point. We're not completed. But what are we asking for? It says round this division problem to the nearest tenth. We now have our division carried out one unit, one place value to the right of the tenths. So we're looking at the tenths. We look to the digit in the hundredths because it's 5 or greater, rounds up. So the solution to this problem, this division problem, which was 0.51 divided by 0.08, rounded to the nearest tenth, is 6 4/10. So that's what you're going to be doing when you are working with division involving decimal numbers when they ask you to round it to a specific place. This is just arithmetic. There's no algebra involved in this. It's just tedious arithmetic. Take your time. Be careful with moving your decimal points. Be careful with your math facts, and you'll do just fine. And I'll see you next time.